Welcome everyone. Happy New Year. Happy 2021. Great to start a new year fresh. If you're in Sydney, the weather's perfect, which is nice. Just in time for us all to go back to the office. As I was saying earlier, we had a few technical difficulties, but we've worked it out. So Sherry, who works in our marketing team, she'll be in control of the slides. So you'll hear me say next slide, please. Usually, obviously, wouldn't need to do that, but today we are. GoToWebinar didn't want to work for me. So Sherry is in control. So thank you again to everyone who has joined. Business Risk Review, looking at December results. We're in January, it's a new year. Let's get on with it. As you know, CreditorWatch, a great big set of products, is a fantastic view of our product suite that we recently released last year to give you a better understanding of what it is that we do. As you can see, everything from customer acquisition, online credit applications using a PlayEasy, through the customer lifetime journey, assess, analyze, automate. Key A's there for us. If you do have any questions about this, whether you're using CreditorWatch or not, you're an existing customer, you're interested, get in touch. We can chat through everything that we can provide. And of course, you can pick and choose what you use. You don't have to use everything. So maybe you just start off with some reports and monitoring and alerts, and then grow from there with us. Next slide, please, Sherry. Some key highlights. So this is a really good slide to understand how is it that we can put a business risk review together? What are we talking about? Where are we getting our data? Who is CreditorWatch? Those sort of things. So 50,000 customers, more than 50,000 customers across Australia now using us. Companies of all sizes, from sole traders all the way up to big four banks. We also have a huge amount of data coming in from public, private, and government data sources. We are analyzing data in real time. We are sending alerts. We are assessing credit. We're putting together new credit ratings, credit scores, payment predictors, automating via API, utilizing all of this information to help you assess how you deal with your customers, and for some of you, how you deal with your suppliers. Next slide, thank you. So what is the business risk review? So very quickly, the key information, key data sources that we're utilizing here, aggregating, and then obviously delivering the results on a monthly basis. All of that data is coming from the likes of government sources like ASIC, APSA, Australian Business Register, courts as well from around Australia. And then we start to use more private information like debt collectors sharing debt that they're chasing from obviously debtors that they've been engaged by creditors. And of course, the most important data source is the 50,000 plus customers that we have. They're sharing the likes of payment default. So when a debtor owes them money, they can register essentially a black mark, or what we call the payment default. Really key indicator of delinquency. And then on top of that, they're sharing trade payment information. So smaller businesses who use Xero and MYOB can actually connect that with CreditorWatch. We're able to pull their receivables information, their invoices, and then larger organizations out there will provide us with their age trial balance on a monthly or fortnightly basis. And that allows us to obviously have a look at how their debtors, everyone's customers are paying their bills, aggregate that all together. We've got debtors with multiple suppliers providing payment terms. So we can say that ABC Proprietary Limited pays on average 45 days overdue. Take that a step further, we look at it from an industry perspective, and that's what we will get into later on in these slides. So let's look at payment defaults first. So payment defaults have typically been a really important early indicator of delinquency, cash flow issues of a company or business entity. And what we've seen through the last 9 months of COVID is that Australians typically are very understanding of companies that are in distress as a result of earthquakes, fires, floods, and then COVID, things that are out of their control. It's not their fault. And what we've seen as a result, similar to administrations, is a really, really big reduction in the number of defaults being registered. So if we look at December 2020 versus 2019, we've seen a 45% decrease in December 2020. However, if we compare November to December last year, we've seen an increase. And I think we're starting to see increases of important indicators like payment defaults. We're seeing payment terms coming down because people are more confident, they're trading better, economic conditions are certainly more favorable than they were earlier in the year. So what we expect to see is a gradual increase in defaults. I think January might be quieter, again, as a result of the fact that most people are away, taking holidays, etc. It seems that people are coming back later this year than previous years as well. But then, Feb onwards, we expect to see an increase in defaults as people go, look, we're getting back to normal across most industries, most locations, despite, outbreaks and border closures, and at least start to see that head back to normal sort of numbers that we would see in a normal trading year. The next slide, please. So let's look at payment time. So this is month on month. This is looking at November 20 versus December 2020. So I think it's about 15 out of 19 of those industries have seen improvements, which is a great indicator for trade. It's a great indicator for the economy. It's a great indicator if you are a creditor out there, which most of you will be. We've still got some that have gone the other way, but very, very small amounts. You can see there, healthcare and social assistance. I think there was a couple more smaller ones at the other end: electricity, gas, water and waste services, and also ag, forestry and fishing, but performing extremely well regardless, despite those slight increases there. So this is a really good sign. We've seen about, I think we're up to 4 months now of overall improvements across the majority of industries out there in terms of payment time. So that's a fantastic indicator of health, of improving cash flow, and we're getting back to we're getting back to 2019 numbers. So if we jump to the next slide, you'll see December 20 versus December 19. Still plenty of industries experiencing, much slower payment cycles than they would in the previous year in 2019, but we've certainly come down a long way on majority of industries, getting closer, closing that gap, which is a really good sign. What can we expect in January? Look, January is one of those months where collectors within a business, not debt collectors, but those who are, in AR are most likely on holiday. And the people that they are calling, if they are actually working, the people they're calling are generally on holiday as well. So you tend to see payment times increase in January. However, it is COVID, so who knows what we will actually see. My gut feel is we'll see a plateau or an increase in payment times across most industries, particularly with the border closures and whatnot that we saw over the Christmas period, and obviously still in place. Some interesting sort of anecdotal discussion I had with someone the other day around the retail sector, that you find that they do their orders in October for the December Jan period. If they don't move it in December Jan, they're stuck with it, and Feb is ultimately when a lot of that starts to fall due, and as a result we start to see an increase as well in administrations in Feb rather than in January, as you might expect. Next slide, please. So the better performing industries that we saw: mining, no surprise there, probably public administration and safety, and agriculture, forestry and fishing, the best performing industries at the moment, all of them down versus December 2019, which is a fantastic sign. And then we saw a slight increase in the ag industry. Next slide. Most impacted ones, so still sitting high here, admin and support services. A lot of that has been brought in-house. Healthcare and social assistance. Healthcare is a strange one. I think I touched on this last year. You think pandemic, surely the health sector is doing really well. The fact is that people are not getting as sick. We're finding that elective surgeries and whatnot are on hold. Everything is COVID focused rather than the rest of the health care industry. So that's put pressure on the whole system, despite the fact that we are in the middle of a health pandemic. Transport, postal and warehousing, again, one of those strange ones where you think, oh, hold on a second, Afterpay, Premier Investments, e-commerce is going gangbusters. The fact is that it's the smaller things like postal and business trade, couriers, that sort of thing that is way down, and that's what's putting pressure on this industry. Next slide, please. Court actions. This is a really good one to have a look at. We're starting to see New South Wales come down, still a big change from 26-27% difference from December 2019. Queensland way out, Victoria way out. So there's a lot of backlog at the moment for multiple reasons. Courts have been closed, COVID restrictions slow things down, statutory demands have been in place, that sort of thing. So there's no surprises there, though WA, obviously a state unto themselves, have had their borders closed pretty much to everyone from very early on and have got on with it, super reliant on the minerals and resources, and it's actually good to see them back at a similar sort of number to what they were in a normal trading year. So that's a positive, and we can only hope that the rest of them get back to it. We obviously don't want to see court actions, but when they're this far down versus the same month 12 months earlier, it's that there's some sort of issue there. There's something's not quite right. Next slide, please. All right, external administration. So this is one that's been talked about ad nauseum since March and since the insolvency legislation changes came into place. Safe harbour provisions came into place. We know that as a result of that, we've had insolvencies administrations down anywhere from sort of 35 to 55% month on month when you're comparing 2020 to 2019. We saw drops again in November. In December, we saw our first significant increase when you compare it to the previous month. So you can see a 23% increase from November to December last year. However, still 32% down on December the previous year. So while there was probably an expectation that there would be potentially an influx of administrations with safe harbour coming to an end on the 31st of December, we certainly haven't seen the same sort of numbers that we would pre-COVID, but we have seen that 23-24% increase versus November. December is typically a quiet month, January even quieter. Again, I think what we will see is similar sort of numbers to December, and then as we go through Jan, Feb, March, the sort of safe harbour, additional safe harbour restructuring provisions that have been put in place come to an end. JobKeeper, job seekers due to come to an end, rental abatement, and also mortgage deferrals, all due to end in March. I wouldn't say there's a March cliff that we can expect, but that will certainly take us to a less synthetic environment, less synthetic trading environment than we're currently in. So I think we'll start to see increases in administrations up to March, and then if there's going to be a big jump, it will come about after that. I definitely expected to see more administrations in December, but thinking in hindsight now, I think ASIC, the ATO, is not going to be overly aggressive with pursuing, ATO debts and or ASIC pursuing directors for insolvent trading. I think they just want to nurse as many businesses through as possible. And then, of course, with the ongoing, spikes in cases and border closures and whatnot, there's going to be a lot of leeway provided to companies and directors. Rightly or wrongly, I think as a creditor, you want ASIC to be all over them. You want ATO to be all over them. Had plenty of questions about ATO tax debts, when they're going to start getting published. Of course, it was approved by government, by Parliament. However, there hasn't been any discussion as to when they'll actually start to release those ATO tax defaults, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, we want to see creditors being able to assess credit and find the good businesses out there to deal with, rather than potentially stepping on landmines coming across any sort of so-called zombie or insolvent businesses out there that are racking up debts and have no intention or no ability to actually pay those in the future. So the sooner we get to a more normal trading environment with less sort of protections or abilities for businesses that are struggling or insolvent to be able to hide behind a veil of government support, the better for our creditors, suppliers, manufacturers, etc. out there that we are seeing. So it's a tough one, no doubt. We did see, if you follow CreditorWatch on LinkedIn or any of the social channels or on mine, we will send out an email next week, but we are publishing, we had our first insolvency notice that we published around that small business insolvency introduction that we saw from the 1st of Jan, which was good to see. So that is now available on credit reports. Let me just get the correct terminology for that because it's just jumped out of my mind quickly. But we are publishing those on credit reports now, which I think is extremely important. Sorry, temporary restructuring relief. So it's the insolvency notice itself comes through as a declaration of eligibility for temporary restructuring relief. We had our first one on the 12th of Jan that came through. So anyone who was monitoring that particular company would have got an email alert, of course, and anyone who performs a search on that company will see it on their credit report. So quite chuffed about that to be able to work so quickly internally. A big shout out to our fantastic internal development team who worked hard to get that live and also worked quite closely with ASIC to ensure that the information was coming through nicely and correctly. So if you've got any questions about that, please don't hesitate to contact us. If not, you will start to see them as they come through. So it was interesting to see the first one. Next slide, I think that might be it. There we go. This is just giving you an understanding of the number of administrations that were taking place month to month. So you can see December, Feb and March, normal sort of numbers there around that 800 to 850 a month. Of course, the legislation changed to introduce safe harbour provisions, and we saw a decrease, a steep decrease into April. Slight increases through to June. Of course, then the second lockdown in Victoria, and essentially most people pulled right back from an administration perspective. We know that JobKeeper got extended, and we know that Safe Harbour got extended from September onwards. So it was very, very flat through the end of the year until we saw a bit of an increase in December. So I think, as I mentioned, we'll start to see a continued increase over the next few months until we get out of that, Q1, and then it's anyone's guess as to how it goes. But I think we can all safely say, bar a few, industries or geographic locations, that Australia is certainly in a much, much better position than almost any other country around the world, but certainly in a much better position than we all anticipated if we went back to, March, April, and then June, July, when there was the Vic outbreak, and then, of course, even through September onwards. So that is fantastic news, and I'm thinking everyone is getting on with business. They're learning that this is how we have to trade. There will be future outbreaks, no doubt, but it's just time to get on with it. So that really takes us to the end of today's presentation. What I will do is I'll just take back over and pop up a quick poll. I can do it here. As always, just want to ask, would you like to be contacted by the CreditorWatch team? Doesn't have to be sales related, it can be anything. It could be sales, it could be questions about the data, it could be questions about that new temporary restructuring relief alerts that come through. Just allows us to get in contact with those who are interested as quickly as possible. All right, most of you have voted. Thank you for that. All right, well, that brings us to the end. As always, we're getting pretty streamlined with these, not to rush them, but we get the data out. It's very clear what everyone's after. If there is more information that you're interested in hearing about from us, please don't hesitate to reach out. Let us know if there's some stats or you know, data sources that potentially we could report on. Maybe they're being reported by other companies as well that would be relevant to share with the data and the insights that we're providing. So until next time, thanks again. Happy New Year, and I hope you're all safe and ready to get back into it. Thanks, everyone.